The silence was the first thing I noticed. Not a peaceful quiet, but a dense, suffocating hush that seemed to swallow the very sound of the courtyard fountains. It was the silence of a held breath, of terrified anticipation. My guards, stern and solid as granite statues, flanked the lone, shabby carriage that had clattered its way into my inner sanctum. The Lycan royal crest on its door was a mockery, a hastily painted lie. This was no state visit. A cold foreboding, sharper than the mountain wind, traced a path down my spine. My wolves felt it too. Obsidian, my midnight black shadow, let out a low, vibrating growl that I felt in the soles of my boots. Frost, his pale silver coat gleaming in the torchlight, tensed, his intelligent eyes fixed on the carriage door. My other three, Ember, Gale, and Thorn, formed a silent, watchful semicircle behind me. The air thrummed with a tension that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with a primal wrongness. The carriage door creaked open, not by a footman, but by a trembling, elderly servant whose face was the color of old parchment. He scrambled down and bowed so deeply I thought he might topple over. "Your majestic majesty, King Caelan," he stammered, not meeting my eyes. "A delivery from Lord Corvin, as per the terms." Terms, my voice, usually a tool of command that filled throne rooms, came out as a low rumble. I recalled a debt, a minor trade agreement secured by a vague clause of honorable settlement. My blood ran cold. No, he would not be so base. "The payment, your majesty," the servant whispered, his gaze darting to the carriage's dark interior. I crossed the cobblestones in 3 long strides, the clicking of my wolf's claws a stark percussion in the eerie quiet. I dismissed the servant with a sharp gesture. He scurried back like a startled beetle. Peering into the gloom of the carriage, I saw her. For a moment I thought it was a trick of the shadows, a bundle of rich fabric abandoned on the seat. Then the bundle moved. A pair of enormous, dark eyes stared back at me, wide with a terror so absolute it was like a physical blow. She was drowning in a gown of crimson velvet, a color too harsh, too adult for the fragile creature wearing it. The dress seemed to consume her, making her look even smaller, a child playing dress-up in a nightmare. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage, white-hot and blinding, surged through me. Corvin, he had sold me a child. She shrank back, pressing herself into the corner of the carriage, as if she could dissolve into the upholstery and vanish. Her fear was a tangible scent in the air, sharp, acidic. My own size, my crown, my very presence was a monster from her stories. I was the giant Lycan king she had been taught to dread. Every instinct told me to reach in, to pull her out, to get her away from that dark box. But I saw myself as she must see me, 7 feet of armored, fanged authority, a beast. So I did the only thing I could think of doing. I lowered myself. I crouched down on the cold stones, making myself smaller, less threatening. I consciously softened the rigid lines of my face, though my heart was pounding a furious war drum against my ribs. "It's all right," I said, and I poured every ounce of calm I did not feel into those 2 words. My voice was a gentle murmur, the one I used for skittish new wolf pups. "You can come out. No one will hurt you here." She didn't move, didn't blink. I tried again, my words slow and soft, threading through the thick silence. "I asked your name. You can tell me. It's all right." A pause stretched, so long I thought she had lost her voice to fear. Then it came, a whisper so faint it was almost carried away by the breeze, a fragile, broken sound. "Liana." Liana, the name hung in the air between us, delicate as a snowflake. It was a name for a girl who chased butterflies in sun-drenched meadows, not one trapped in a gilded cage. "Liana," I repeated, letting the syllables roll gently off my tongue. "That is a beautiful name, a strong name." I kept my tone feather-light, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "Do you know why you're here, Liana?" A tiny, jerky nod. Her small hands, lost in the voluminous sleeves, twisted the velvet fabric into knots. When she spoke, her voice was a threadbare confession. "My uncle, he said I had to come. He owes you a great debt, and I am the payment." Each word was forced out, heavy with a shame she should never have had to carry. My jaw clamped shut so hard I heard my teeth grind. The rage solidified into something cold and diamond-hard in my chest. I took a slow, controlled breath, fighting to keep my aura calm, my scent non-threatening. "And do you want to be here, Liana?" I asked, the question crucial. "Do you want to marry me?" Her reaction was not fear this time, but utter bewildering confusion. Her head tilted slightly, those huge eyes blinking as if I'd spoken in a forgotten tongue. The question itself was an alien concept. "I don't know," she whispered, her brow furrowing. "Uncle said I have to. He said it is my duty now." That was the final twist of the knife. Duty. He had weaponized her innocence, her obedience. The cold fury in my veins ignited. "Your Uncle Corvin," I stated, my voice flat and hard as riverstone, "is a coward and a liar." The gasps from the lingering servant and my own guards were sharp in the quiet. Liana flinched as if struck. I pressed on, my gaze locked on hers, willing her to understand. "Listen to me. You do not have to do anything you do not wish to. Do you understand me? That paper he signed, that contract, was made by grasping, greedy adults. You are a child. Children do not make such bargains. Adults do. And I am an adult, and I am deciding right here and right now that this contract is void. It is nothing but ash." "But, Your Majesty," the old servant finally found his voice, laced with panic. "Lord Corvin, he will be furious. There will be consequences." I rose to my full height in one smooth, powerful motion, turning my gaze on the man. My shadow fell over him, and he quailed. "What will he?" The question was a soft growl, more dangerous than any shout. "Will he harm her? Is that the fate that awaits her if I send her back with you? Tell me." The servant's eyes dropped to the ground, his shoulders slumping in defeat. His silence was a scream. It was answer enough. The two paths before me crystallized, each more horrific than the last. Keep a terrified child as a purported bride, or send her back to a man who would doubtless punish her for my rejection, perhaps lethally. A perfect trap, a masterpiece of vile manipulation. I turned back to Liana. She was still trembling, a slight figure silhouetted against the dark carriage interior, looking as if a strong gust of wind would shatter her into a million pieces. In that moment, my course became clear. It was not a choice, but a calling. My vow as a king and as a man reformed itself around this one fragile life. I crouched down again, my voice dropping back into that gentle register, but now infused with an unshakable certainty. "You will stay here," I told her, each word a promise laid in stone. "But not as my bride, not as a ward bound by that filthy scrap of paper. You will stay as my protected, under my roof, under my guard. You will be fed, clothed, educated, and kept safe. When you are a woman grown, old enough to make your own choices about your life, you will. But until that day dawns, you are under my protection. No one will touch you. No one will harm you. And that," I said, holding her gaze with fierce intensity, "includes me. Do you understand?" Liana stared, the storm of confusion in her eyes now mixed with a dawning, hesitant hope. It was quickly overshadowed by disbelief. I don't understand," she breathed. "You don't want me?" The ache in my chest deepened. "I do not want a child," I said, emphasizing the word with all the gravity I possessed. "There is a world of difference, Liana, a universe of difference." I stood and addressed the cowering servant, my tone shifting to one of absolute, unyielding command. "You will return to Lord Corvin. You will tell him the girl stays. The debt, as far as I am concerned, is settled, but the marriage contract is dissolved. It is over. If he has a problem with my judgment, he is welcome to come and voice it to me himself." The servant bowed, a frantic, jerky motion, and scrambled back toward the driver's seat, eager to flee the icy fury in my court. I looked back at Liana. The initial shock was wearing off, and in its place, a new wave of emotion was breaking. Silent tears, glistening like diamonds in the torchlight, began to trace slow paths down her pale cheeks. They were not the tears of a tantrum, but of a profound, overwhelming release. They undid me more completely than any scream could have. "Come inside, Liana," I said, my voice softening into something akin to warmth. "You must be freezing, and you must be hungry. Let's get you somewhere warm." I offered no hand, no touch that could startle her. I simply turned and began walking slowly toward the great arched entrance of the castle keep. I sensed, more than heard, her hesitant steps as she finally emerged from the carriage. The oppressive velvet gown whispered against the stones. My wolves fell into step with an instinctual, graceful precision. Obsidian moved to her left side, a wall of solid, protective darkness. Frost took her right, his pale fur glowing, a gentle guardian. They bracketed her, not crowding, but creating a living shield between her and the vast, intimidating world of the castle courtyard. She walked between them, a small, lost figure, her tears falling silently. She moved like a ghost, too overwhelmed to even fear the massive predators guiding her. We entered the grand hall. The soaring ceilings and towering tapestries only made her seem smaller. I called out, my voice echoing, "Ilara, I need you, please." Ilara, the head of my household, appeared from a side passage, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a steely core. She had run my home with efficiency and compassion for 3 decades. She took in the scene in an instant, me, the wolves, and the tiny tear-stained girl in the absurd crimson gown. Her sharp eyes softened immediately, radiating a maternal warmth that filled the space. "Oh, my stars!" she breathed, her hand fluttering to her heart. "Your Majesty, who is this little dove?" "This is Liana," I said, the weariness of the last half hour seeping into my bones. "She was sent by Corvin as payment." I could not keep the bitter disgust from the word. "She is 12 years old, Ilara. She needs a room, proper clothes, food. Above all, she needs to feel safe. She will have chambers in the East Wing, in the children's suites, not the royal quarters. Is that perfectly understood?" Ilara's face shifted from soft concern to grim comprehension, then back to determined kindness. She nodded once, a sharp, efficient motion. "Perfectly, Your Majesty." She dismissed the implications, the politics, and focused on the child. She approached Liana not as a subject, but as a caregiver. She knelt, bringing herself to Liana's eye level, a mirror of my own action in the courtyard. "Hello, my dear heart," she said, her voice a soothing balm. "My name is Ilara. I look after this big, drafty old place. You look like you've had a long, frightful journey. How about we get you out of this heavy dress, draw you a warm bath, and find you some supper? Does that sound like a good start?" Liana, who had been staring at the floor, looked up at Ilara's kind face. After a moment, she gave a single, hesitant nod, still unable to speak. Ilara smiled, a genuine, comforting gesture, and gently took Liana's small hand in hers. "There now, follow me. We'll have you sorted in no time." As Ilara led her away, Liana glanced back once over her shoulder. Her eyes met mine, still swimming with tears and confusion, but the raw edge of terror was gone, replaced by a weary, fragile trust. Then she was gone, down the corridor, swallowed by the warmth and normality Ilara represented. I stood alone in the grand hall, the silent stones echoing the tumult in my soul. The wolves remained. Obsidian padded forward and looked up at me, his golden eyes holding an intelligence that saw straight through my royal facade. In them I saw a clear, blunt question and a judgment. "I know," I muttered, running my hair through my hair. "It is a tangled mess, a political nightmare, a scandal waiting to happen." He gave a low huff, laying his massive head on his paws, his gaze never leaving mine. I asked the empty hall, "But what was the alternative, my friend? Send her back to that? Condemn her for a man's greed?" Obsidian merely blinked, slow and deliberate. In his silence, I found my answer. There had been no alternative at all. The path was set. I had made my vow. Now I had to navigate the consequences and shield that fragile life from the storm that was sure to come. The silence after Liana left was louder than any council debate. It was a silence full of echoes, the ghost of her whispered name, the memory of her tear-streaked face. Obsidian's judgmental gaze was a physical weight. I retreated to my study, the wolves flowing around me like dark water. The fire crackled, but it did nothing to dispel the chill that had settled in my core, not from the cold, but from a seething, righteous fury. For 3 days, I became a Shadow King. I attended to only the most urgent matters, my mind a world away. I summoned my most discreet agents, my spymaster Silas, a man who moved like smoke and knew every secret whispered in the kingdom. I called in markers with informants from the southern trade routes, where Corvin held his dwindling lands. I pored over the original contract, the vague language now screaming with malicious intent. Honorable settlement of familial obligation. The weasel words made me want to rip the parchment to shreds. Piece by painful piece, the truth was laid bare before me. It was a story more wretched than I had imagined. Liana's parents, kind, minor landowners by all accounts, had succumbed to a swift, brutal fever 2 winters past. She had been 10, the sole heir, and utterly alone. Corvin, her father's shiftless younger brother, had swooped in as guardian, not out of familial duty, but as a vulture claims a carcass. The reports were stark. He had treated her not as family, but as a burdensome servant. She was kept in a small, cold room in the west wing at his manor, allowed out only for chores. She was fed scraps, her education abandoned. When noble guests visited, she was locked away, a shameful secret. His gambling debts, it turned out, were legendary. He had mortgaged his lands, his title, his future, and then he saw his final, most valuable asset, his orphaned niece. The contract I had signed months ago, a routine trade agreement, had been his trap. The ambiguous clause was his loophole. He had not just sent me a child, he had engineered it, betting everything on my honor being both my strength and my weakness. He knew a man of my standing could not publicly accept a child bride without being branded a monster, but he also gambled that I could not, in good conscience, send her back to him, knowing what he was. It was a masterstroke of cowardly manipulation, perfectly legal in its disgusting framework. The cold fury in my heart ignited into a white-hot inferno. I wanted to march south that very hour, shift into my Lycan form, and tear Corvin's manor apart stone by stone with him in it. The primal urge to protect, to avenge, was a drumbeat in my blood. Obsidian, sensing my rage, let out a low, continuous growl that vibrated through the floorboards. But I was not just a beast. I was a king. A public execution or a vengeful raid would start a political fire I might not be able to control. It would also drag Liana's name through the mud, making her the center of a savage scandal. My revenge had to be colder, more precise, and utterly devastating. I enacted my judgment not with claw and tooth, but with parchment and seal. Using the evidence of fraud, endangerment of a minor, and breach of contract, I had the royal council strip Corvin of his lordship. His lands were seized by the crown. His remaining assets were liquidated to pay his creditors. He was declared persona non grata throughout the realm, banished on pain of death should he ever return. The order was delivered by a unit of my most intimidating guards. I was told he wept, he raged, he begged. The image gave me no pleasure. It was not enough. It would never be enough for the 2 years of hell he had put that child through, but it was the justice the law allowed. While this silent war waged in the world of documents and decrees, a quieter, more important transformation was beginning within the castle walls. Alara was a force of nature. She had Lyanna moved into a sun-drenched suite in the family wing, a room that had once belonged to a young visiting princess. It was painted in soft creams and pale blues, with a window that overlooked the kitchen gardens, always full of life and color. The monstrous crimson gown was burned. In its place, Alara procured simple, well-made dresses in soft wools and linens, clothes that fit a girl of 12, not a doll for a cruel man's scheme. Lyanna was given her own maid, a gentle girl named Bryn, not much older than herself. There were lessons, too. A kind, elderly tutor named Master Tillman was engaged to restart her education in history, letters, and mathematics. I kept my distance. It was the hardest and easiest thing to do. Hard because a part of me, the alpha protective, wanted to constantly check, to ensure the fear was gone from her eyes. Easy because I knew it was necessary. Gossip was the bloodline of court, and already I heard the whispers, the curious, the skeptical, the malicious. The king's new pet. A bastard child, surely. He waits to claim his prize. Each one was a poison dart. My proximity would only fuel them, so I instituted a ritual, a weekly visit, every 7th day afternoon, always with Alara present. The first few visits were exercises in silent endurance. I would sit in the sunny parlor adjacent to her rooms. Alara would bring tea. Lyanna would sit across from me, back straight, hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor or out the window. She would answer my questions in monosyllables. "Are your rooms comfortable, Lyanna?" "Yes." "Is Master Tillman a good teacher?" "Yes." "Do you need anything?" A shake of her head, eyes still downcast. The air would be thick with a tension that had nothing to do with fear of harm, but with the sheer, overwhelming strangeness of her situation. I was a king, a near mythical figure, asking about her lessons. It was absurd. I would drink my tea, make stilted comments about the weather or a new book in the library, and after 15 minutes I would leave, feeling like I had done more harm than good. But Alara, in her weekly debriefs, told a different story. "She eats everything on her plate now," she'd say, a note of pride in her voice. "She and Bryn have started walking in the lower gardens. She smiled today, Your Majesty, a real smile when one of the kitchen cats had kittens." These small victories were my solace. And then there were the wolves. They, unlike me, had no concept of political propriety. Their loyalty had subtly, irrevocably shifted. Frost, in particular, had appointed himself her personal guardian. I would often see him from my study window, a pale ghost moving beside her as she walked in the garden. He would lie at the foot of her bed at night, a living, breathing nightlight. He allowed her to do what she would never dare with me, touch him. She would bury her small hands in his thick fur, and he would lean into the contact, a soft rumble in his chest. One 7th day, about 2 months after her arrival, something changed. I asked my usual question, "How are your studies progressing?" Instead of a muted, "fine," she looked up. Her eyes met mine for a sustained second before flicking away. "Master Tillman says I am good at history," she said, her voice still quiet but clear. "He says I remember dates and names well, but
I don't like arithmetic very much.
It was a full sentence, an opinion, a tiny fragment of her personality offered up. I felt a ridiculous surge of triumph, carefully masked. I was dreadful at arithmetic, I confessed, leaning forward slightly. My old tutor used to say I had a head for strategy, but not for numbers. Perhaps you take after me in that. It was a risk, a small joke, connecting myself to her. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed her face. Not a smile, but the ghost of one. She didn't reply, but she didn't shrink back either. It was a crack in the ice. After that, the weekly visits became less an interrogation and more of a report. She spoke a little more each time. She told me about the kittens, named after spices from the kitchen. She mentioned a book of fables from the library she enjoyed. She asked, one day, with breathtaking shyness, "Do the wolves have names? All of them?" I spent that entire visit telling her about them. Obsidian, my stern shadow; Frost, her gentle friend; Ember, whose coat had hints of russet; Gale, swift and silent; Thorn, watchful and precise. She listened, rapt, forgetting her nervousness. "Frost is my favorite," she admitted in a whisper, as if it were a secret. "He seems to have chosen you," I said. "It is a high honor. He is very particular." That earned me a full, unguarded smile. It was a small, shy thing, but it lit up her entire face, transforming her from a haunted portrait into a living, breathing girl. In that moment, I saw not the payment, not the ward, but Liana. And my vow, which had begun as a duty, began to root itself in something deeper, something dangerously akin to affection. The castle around her ceased to be a gilded prison and began to become a home. I heard her laughter sometimes echoing from the lower halls with Bryn. I saw her running across the south lawn with Frost loping beside her, her hair flying free, the dark gowns replaced by a simple sky blue dress. She was healing, growing. The ghost was slowly being filled with light. By the time her 13th birthday arrived, the transformation was undeniable. Alara organized a small celebration in the family dining hall. There was a cake, not too large, and a few gifts. New books, some fine charcoal drawing, a warm cloak from Alara. I attended, feeling like a slightly awkward monument amidst the girlish chatter. My gift was simple: unrestricted access to the royal stables, with permission to learn to ride a gentle pony under the watchful eye of the master of horse. She looked at the voucher, her eyes wide. "Truly?" "Truly," I said. "Every queen and every independent woman should know how to ride. It teaches balance and trust, and gives you a taste of freedom." She thanked me, her smile genuine and bright. She was no longer the skeletal waif from the carriage. Her cheeks had filled out, her eyes had lost their perpetual shadow. She was still slight, still quiet, but the constant tremor of fear was gone. She was a child again, or perhaps for the first time. That night, as I walked back to my chambers with Obsidian at my heel, I felt a profound, complicated peace. The political storm from Corvin's exile had mostly blown over, relegated to a juicy piece of court gossip. The whispers about Liana had softened, changing from speculation to a vague acknowledgement of the king's charitable ward. I had built her a sanctuary. I had kept her safe. But as I watched her blow out the candles on her cake, laughing at something Bryn said, a new, quiet terror began to whisper in the back of my mind. This was the easy part. Protecting a child was a clear line, but children have a stubborn habit of growing up, and I was beginning to dread the day when the clear lines would start to blur. 3 years. They passed in a cascade of seasons, each one etching a subtle change in Liana, marking her journey from a rescued child into something more complex, a young woman on the cusp. I maintained my careful distance, a sentinel watching a sapling grow strong in the sunlight I had provided, but never daring to cast my own shadow upon it. Our 7th-day visits evolved. They became the anchor of my week, a quiet hour I fiercely protected from all council meetings and petitions. We graduated from the parlor to the smaller, cozier library annex. Alara would still be present, often pretending to be engrossed in her knitting in a corner chair, a chaperone whose sharp ears missed nothing.
Liana, at 15, had shed all remnants of the fearful ghost. She was still soft-spoken, but now it seemed a trait of thoughtful nature, not timidity. She spoke of her lessons with lively interest, her growing passion for history, her grudging truce with arithmetic. She loved botany, could name every herb in the kitchen garden and its use. She had a keen, observant eye, often pointing out a rare bird from the window or the first bloom of a stubborn flower. And she loved the wolves with a depth that was mutual. Frost was her constant companion, but the others had warmed to her completely. She was the only person besides me whom Thorn, the most aloof of the pack, would allow to scratch behind his ears. She had a calm authority with them, a calm energy they respected. It was around her 16th birthday that everything shifted again in a way I could never have predicted. Alara came to my study one evening, her expression a mix of concern and awe. "Your Majesty, something unusual has happened with Liana." My heart foolishly clenched. "Is she unwell?" No, not unwell, She was in the kitchens, helping old Martha sort the healing herbs. One of the young scullery maids, Elena, was crying. Her sweetheart had left for the Eastern Guard. Liana, trying to comfort her, touched her hand and she flinched as if burned. She told Elena she could feel her sadness, that it was a heavy gray weight in her chest. She described the boy's face, Elena's fear he wouldn't return, things she had no way of knowing. An empath. The realization landed with a quiet thud. It was a rare gift, one that ran in old bloodlines, often dormant for generations. A power to sense emotions, sometimes thoughts, through touch. A powerful, dangerous, and exhausting talent. "How did she react?" I asked, my mind already racing through the implications. "She was frightened at first," Alara said, but Elena was so comforted, saying Liana had understood her perfectly. Since then, she's been testing it, cautiously. She touched a locket one of the guards dropped. She went pale and said she felt love and loss. It belonged to his late mother. This changed everything. A ward with a hidden, powerful gift. It made her vulnerable in new ways. It also made her potentially invaluable. She must learn to control it, I decided decisively, to shield herself. An untrained empath is an open wound, feeling every pain around them. I sent for Eris, an elderly scholar in my employ who was said to have studied psychic disciplines. He was discreet, kind, and began working with Liana on techniques to manage the influx of emotion, to build mental walls. I watched this new facet of her develop with a mixture of pride and deepening anxiety. She took to the training with serious dedication. She began to use her gift quietly, responsibly. She helped settle a dispute between two stable hands by simply shaking their hands and revealing the simple misunderstanding at the root of their anger. She would walk through the lower halls and sense a servant's hidden illness or sorrow, quietly alerting Ilara so help could be given. She was no longer just my ward. She was becoming a healer, a mediator, a person of quiet power in her own right. The court began to notice. The whispers changed tone. "The girl has the sight," some said. "The king's little seer." It was a different kind of attention, laced with a hint of superstition and respect. And with this new power came a new awareness, in her, in me. I first noticed it on her 17th birthday. Ilara had arranged a slightly more formal dinner in the family hall. Liana entered wearing a dress of deep emerald green, simple but elegantly cut. It was the first time I had seen her in a color that wasn't a pastel or a practical wool. She had grown. The childish roundness had melted from her face, revealing fine, elegant bones. Her dark hair, usually braided, was swept up in a soft style. She was no longer a pretty child. She was a beautiful young woman. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a treacherous warmth flooding my chest, followed immediately by a wave of ice-cold shame. I looked away, focusing on the cutlery, on the tapestry behind her, anywhere but on her, but the image was seared into my mind. During dinner, she spoke about a complex historical text she was deciphering with Master Tillman. Her analysis was sharp, insightful, challenging my own views on the period. I found myself engaged, debating her, a thrill of intellectual connection sparking that had nothing to do with guardianship. She laughed at a point I made, and the sound, clear, confident, musical, did something strange to my equilibrium. I saw her watching me, too, not with the shy, deferential glances of before, but with a thoughtful, considering gaze. When I handed her a goblet, our fingers brushed for a millisecond. A jolt like static passed between us. She inhaled sharply, her eyes flying to mine. In that instant, I knew her gift had flared. She had felt something from me. The shame returned. We doubled. What had she sensed? Paternal pride? It was a lie. The emotion had been too sharp, too warm, too confused to be so simple. I built the wall higher that night. I became more formal in our interactions. I cut our seventh-day visits to a strict 30 minutes. I avoided the gardens if I saw her there with Frost. The internal conflict was a war zone. One side, the alpha, the man, was painfully, undeniably aware of her as a woman. The other side, the king, the guardian, roared in condemnation. She was 17. She had been entrusted to my care as a child. This was the most profound betrayal of that trust. It was inappropriate, grotesque, a confirmation of every vile whisper I had fought to silence. The tension between us became a living thing. The easy camaraderie of our library talks evaporated, replaced by a stilted politeness. She felt the withdrawal. Of course she did. The light in her eyes when she saw me dimmed. She stopped offering her opinions freely. She just complied. The breaking point came 3 weeks after her birthday. She requested a private audience. My every instinct screamed to refuse, but to do so would be to acknowledge the dangerous shift, to give it power. I agreed, stipulating Ilara wait right outside the open study door. She stood before my desk, hands clasped, that new, womanly poise about her, but her knuckles were white. Kaylin, and the use of my name, not my title, sent another forbidden thrill through me. I need to tell you something. I am listening, I said, my voice carefully neutral, my face a mask of polite attention. She took a deep, shuddering breath, gathering a courage I could feel radiating from her. I know, I am falling in love with you. The words dropped into the silence of the room like stones into a still pond, rippling out with devastating force. For a long moment I could not speak, I could not breathe. The war inside me reached a crescendo. The part of me that wanted to hear those words sang with a forbidden joy. The king, the guardian, reacted with pure, unadulterated terror. No, I said finally, the word coming out far gentler than I felt. Yes, I am, she insisted, her voice gaining strength. I've thought of little else. I am sure of it. I stood, needing the desk as a barrier, needing to reclaim the physical height of my authority. Liana, you are 17 years old. I am over 400 years old. That is not just an age gap, it is a chasm. It is inappropriate. What you are feeling is natural, but it is not love. You are young, you are confused, and you are perhaps grateful, deeply grateful. That gratitude can feel like love, but it is not the same thing. Her face flushed, not with shyness now, but with frustration. I know the difference between gratitude and love. I am grateful to Ilara, to Master Tillman, to Bryn. This is nothing like that. And how would you know? I pressed, my own frustration and fear making me cruel. Have you been in love before? Have you had a sweetheart, a crush, a flirtation? How can you be certain of a feeling you've never experienced? What you feel for me is a trauma bond. It is deep, it is real, but it is born from rescue, not from equality. I saw the words land, saw the hurt flash in her eyes like a wounded animal, and I hated myself. It is not, she whispered, but the conviction was wavering, clouded by doubt I planted. It is, I said, softer now, but no less firm. and I am sorry, but I will not act on it. I will not do anything inappropriate. You are under my protection, Liana. That means I protect you from everyone, including myself, especially myself." I looked at her then, really looked, seeing the confusion, the stubborn hope, the heartbreak blooming. "Ask me again when you are 20, I said, the sentence feeling like a lifeline and a sentence all at once. 3 years? She breathed, a plea, a sentence in itself. 3 years, I affirmed, my heart a block of stone in my chest. If you truly have feelings for me, you will respect that I need that time as well. Time to be sure this isn't something wrong, something that would ultimately hurt you." She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, the movement full of a defeat that crushed me. She didn't argue. She simply turned and left the room, her shoulders set in a line of quiet despair. I stood rooted to the spot long after she had gone, long after Ilara had shot me a look of profound disappointment before following her. The study felt cavernous, empty, and cold. I had done the right thing, the only thing. I had protected her from a potentially catastrophic mistake, from my own weakness. So why did it feel like I had just broken something infinitely precious? And why did the thought of the next 3 years stretching before us, shrouded in this new, painful distance, feel like a punishment worse than any exile? The year that followed Liana's confession was the longest of my long life. It was a year lived in shades of gray, under constant drizzling rain of regret and isolation. I had built a wall with my words, and it stood between us, higher and colder than any castle curtain. The vibrant, intelligent young woman who had begun to emerge retreated. In her place was a polite, distant echo. Our 7th-day visits continued, a grim parody of their former warmth. They were now strictly administrative. She would report on her studies, her progress with controlling her empathic gift under Eris's guidance. I would inquire about her health, her needs. The conversation never strayed. The air in the library annex was frigid. Ilara's knitting needles clicked like a metronome counting out the minutes until the torture could end. I watched her from afar, a ghost in my own castle. I saw her in the gardens with Frost, sitting on a stone bench, her head bent close to his as she spoke in low murmurs. I knew she was talking to him about me, about her confusion, her hurt. The wolf would listen, his intelligent eyes fixed on her, offering a silent, unconditional solace I could not. The sight was a physical ache. I saw her throwing herself into her work. Her empathic gift flourished under discipline. She began to assist in small official capacities. She would sit in on minor land dispute hearings, her touch on a disputed ledger or a family seal, helping to uncover hidden truths or lies. The court started calling her the Truth Singer. It was a name of respect, born of her skill, not her connection to me. I was proud, a fierce, bursting pride that I had to lock away, another forbidden emotion. She grew more beautiful with each passing month, a fact I noted with a sense of horrified inevitability. At 18, she was legally an adult in the eyes of the kingdom. On that birthday, I called her to my study. It was time. "You are free," I told her, the words tasting of ash. "The contract that brought you here is null. You have no obligation to me or this court. I will provide you with a dowry, land, a title if you wish. You may go wherever you desire, build whatever life you choose, or you may stay as an independent member of the court, for your skills are valuable. The choice is entirely yours." She stood before me, her posture regal, her eyes clear but guarded. She didn't hesitate. "I choose to stay. Not as your obligation, as Liana, the truth singer. I have work here that matters." Relief, sweet and painful, flooded me. "Very well. You will have an official position on the Civic Council, a salary, your own chambers in the adult wing of the castle. You answer to the head of council, not to me." She nodded, a formal, shallow dip of her head. "Thank you, Your Majesty." She turned to leave, then paused at the door, a ghost of the old connection flickering. 2 more years, she said softly, not looking back. So do I whispered to the empty room after she was gone. The distance was now codified, official. It should have made things easier. It did not. It merely made the longing more acute, framed by the knowledge that she was now a free woman, choosing to stay in the same cage I occupied. Why? Duty? Habit? Or could the feelings she professed still be there, buried under the ice? My own feelings were a chaotic storm I could no longer deny. I was falling in love with her. It was a terrifying, exhilarating, shameful truth. I loved her keen mind, her gentle heart, her quiet strength. I loved the woman she had fought so hard to become, and I hated myself for it, for the position I had put us both in, for the impossible years between us. My wolves, as always, were my silent confessors. They witnessed my turmoil. One evening, deep in the bleak midwinter of that year, I was in my private chambers. A fire roared, but it couldn't touch the chill inside me. The 5 of them were sprawled around the room. Obsidian lay by the hearth, his gaze fixed on me, heavy with disapproval. Frost was absent, doubtless with Lyanna. Ember, Gale, and Thorn watched me with an unnerving collective focus. Suddenly, Obsidian stood. He padded across the thick rug and nudged my hand with his massive head, a demand for attention. "What?" I asked, my voice rough. He made a low sound in his throat, not a growl, but a rumble of profound dissatisfaction. Then he looked pointedly at the door. "You think I'm a fool," I stated. Another rumble. Agreement. "I am doing what is right." A sharp huff. Disbelief. Then Gale stood. The sleek, gray wolf walked to the chamber door. He looked at me, then at the door, then back at me. His message was as clear as if he had spoken. "Go to her. Fix this." "No," I said, the refusal automatic. "I can't. She needs space. I need to stay away." Gale scratched at the ornate wood, a sharp, insistent sound. Now all of them were looking at me. Obsidian, Ember, Thorn, even Gale by the door. A tribunal of wolves passing judgment on a king's cowardice. Their collective will was a palpable force in the room. They understood bonds, loyalty, pack. They saw the fracture between me and Lyanna as a sickness in the pack, and they were demanding I heal it. I sighed, the sound ragged. "Fine," I muttered, pushing myself out of my chair. "But if this makes everything worse, the blame lies with you." I walked the silent, torch-lit corridors, the wolves flowing around me. The castle was asleep. I found her, as I somehow knew I would, in the main library. She was curled in a window seat, a book open but forgotten in her lap, staring out at the moonlit snow. Frost lay at her feet. He thumped his tail once in recognition but didn't move. Lyanna turned. Surprise, then wariness flickered across her face. "Your Majesty," she said, the title a deliberate wall. "Lyanna." I stopped a respectful distance away. "May we talk?" "Haven't we said all that needs saying?" The hurt was still there, just beneath the polite surface.
"No," I said, my voice low. "I don't think we have." I sat in a chair opposite her window seat. Frost shifted subtly, positioning himself between us, a loyal Bardian to her, a silent mediator to me. "I wanted to explain," I began, "why I said no. Truly why." "You explained. I'm too young. You're too old. It's inappropriate." "Yes, but I didn't explain the rest, the part that terrifies me." That caught her attention. She set her book aside slowly. "I'm listening." And so I poured out my heart to the moonlit shadows and the girl who held it captive. When you arrived, you were 12, terrified, broken by what your uncle had done. I saw only a child who needed protection,
That is all I allowed myself to see. For years, you were my ward, my sacred responsibility. I took that vow more seriously than any crown oath. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, my gaze locked on the firelight reflected in her eyes. And then, you grew up. Somewhere between 12 and 17, you became someone else, someone remarkable, and I didn't notice the exact moment it happened. I just woke up one day and realized I was thinking of you differently, seeing you differently, feeling things I had sworn I would never feel. I saw her breath catch. I pressed on, the dam broken, and it terrified me. It still does, because what if I'm wrong? What if this is just some twisted byproduct of you being here, of me being your protector? What if it's a sickness of proximity? What if I hurt you, Liana? What if in 3 years you realize this was never real, that it was just gratitude and trauma, and I took advantage of that? I could not live with myself. So I wait. I give you time to be sure, and I give myself time to be sure this isn't something broken. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It was full, charged, understanding. Then she spoke, her voice a soft murmur in the quiet room. Do you know what I remember most about the day I arrived? I shook my head. How gentle you were. I'd been told kings were cruel, that you would hurt me, that I should be more afraid of you than of my uncle. And then you crouched down. You made yourself small for me. You asked my name in the kindest voice I had ever heard. You didn't touch me. You didn't force me. You just offered safety. She met my gaze, her own shimmering. You saved me that day, not just from dying. You saved me from believing the world was only pain and cruelty. She took a slow breath, her courage mirroring my own. You ask if what I feel is real. I've asked myself that every day for a year, and here is what I know. Gratitude fades. I was grateful to Alara, to my tutors. That didn't turn into love. But with you, it's different. I don't just respect you. I think about you when you're not there. I notice the tired lines by your eyes after a long council, the way you smile at your wolves, how you take your tea. Those aren't things you notice about someone you're just grateful to. Those are things you notice when you're in love. The words hung between us, a truth I could no longer battle. I still think you're too young, I said, but the protest was weak, the foundation crumbling. Maybe, she conceded, a hint of her old spirit returning. But I'm not getting any younger, and you're not getting any less 400. So at some point we either accept this or we don't. You asked me to wait until I'm 20. I'll wait, but know that I'm not waiting because I'm unsure. I'm waiting because you asked me to, because respecting what you need is part of loving you too. Something in my chest, long frozen, cracked open, not to break, but to bloom. This woman, this wise, patient, incredible woman, understood. She saw my fear not as a rejection, but as a form of care. The weight of the past year lifted, leaving behind a fragile, soaring hope. 3 years, I said, the number now a promise, not a prison sentence. 2.5 now. If you still feel this way when you're 20, we will talk, really talk. No more deflection, no more protection, just honesty. I promise, she said. 2.5 years, she echoed, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. I can do that. We sat in a companionable silence then, the coldness gone, replaced by a shared, patient understanding. Frost, sensing the peace, rested his head back on his paws. The crisis, for now, was averted. I left the library not with despair, but with a heart lighter than it had been in a year. The path was still long and fraught with peril, but for the first time we were walking it together, even if we were walking apart, and in that there was a world of difference. The fragile peace we forged in the library that night held. The ice thawed, not into the easy familiarity of before, but into a respectful, warm truce. The invisible wall remained, but now it had a gate in it, and we both knew the date it would open. 2.5 years. It was a shared secret, a quiet hope that warmed the edges of our interactions. Liana flourished. At 19, her position on the Civic Council was no longer ceremonial. Her empathic gift, honed to a fine tool, became indispensable. She mediated merchant disputes, uncovering hidden fraud with a handshake. She helped settle bitter family inheritance conflicts by touching heirlooms and sensing the true intentions of the deceased. She was fair, compassionate, and unerringly accurate. The title Truth Singer was spoken with genuine reverence. She had built a life, an identity entirely separate from being the Lycan King's ward. My pride in her was a constant, glowing ember in my chest. And with her independence came suitors. It was inevitable. She was 19, breathtakingly beautiful in an elegant, understated way, intelligent, kind, and now respected. She was a prize. Young lords from good families began to appear at court functions with new frequency. The son of Lord Brennan, a handsome, earnest young man of 23, was the first. I watched from my throne as he brought her a bouquet of winter roses after a council session, asking if she would ride with him. My hand tightened on the arm of my chair. I saw her polite smile, her graceful decline, citing urgent research. The relief that washed through me was immediate and shaming. Then came the merchant's son, Ronan, whose wealth was matched only by his clever tongue. He spoke of trade routes and exotic lands, offering to show her his fleet of ships. She listened politely, asked insightful questions about cargo laws, and again declined any personal outing. A visiting knight from a neighboring kingdom composed terrible poetry in her honor. A young scholar dedicated a dry thesis on river ecosystems to her.
I watched this parade of eligible, appropriate young men with a complex storm of emotions. Relief each time she gently refused. Guilt for that relief. A fierce, possessive jealousy that was utterly unworthy of me. And a grinding fear that one of them, eventually, would be charming enough, persistent enough, young enough to spark something in her. The thought was a physical pain. One evening, after she had declined a fifth suitor, the earnest poet knight, I found her walking in the twilight gardens. I fell into step beside her, Frost materializing to pad along on her other side. "You are collecting quite the assortment of admirers," I said, aiming for a light, teasing tone that fell flat. She glanced at me, a hint of her old sharpness in her gaze. "They are persistent. You've rejected every one. Is there not a single one who interests you? Lord Brennan's son seems a decent man, good family." She stopped, turning to face me. The last light of day gilded her features. "Because I am not interested in any of them." "But you haven't given them a chance. A conversation over supper, a walk in the gardens. It is what people your age do." "Life isn't about what people do, Kaylin," she said, echoing my own long-ago lesson. "It's about what is true. Leading someone to believe they have a chance when they do not is crueler than a clear no from the start." The directness stole my breath. I took a risk, the question hanging between us like a sword. "Is it me? Are you rejecting them because of me?" She didn't flinch. "Yes." The simplicity of the answer was devastating, and I will not apologize for it. "You asked me to wait until I am 20. I am waiting. But that does not mean I have to entertain other options while I wait. I am allowed to know what I want and not waste anyone's time pretending otherwise." The conviction in her voice, the sheer unshakable certainty undid me. "How," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "did I get so lucky?" Her expression softened. "You didn't get lucky, you made a choice. 7 years ago, you chose to protect a child instead of claiming a bride.
That choice led here, to me, to this moment. You earned this, Kaelin. Don't you dare diminish it by calling it luck." Her words resonated in my soul. She was right. This agonizing path of patience was the consequence of that first, foundational choice. It was a path we were walking together. But a deeper fear remained. A fear that my protection had become its own kind of cage. 3 months before her 20th birthday, I made the hardest decision of our long journey. I called her to my study. She entered, curious. The trust was back in her eyes, and it made what I had to say all the more difficult. "I need to send you away," I said without preamble. All color drained from her face. "What?" "For 6 months. You will travel, see the southern coasts, the northern mountains, the eastern capitals, meet people, other people, young people." "Why?" The word was a breath of hurt. "Because you have spent almost 8 years within these walls, under my shadow. You know me, my court, my world, but you do not know any other. How can you choose this life, choose me, if it is the only life you have ever known? You need to see what else the world holds. You need to be absolutely, incontrovertibly free." "I have chosen," she insisted, her eyes blazing. "I choose every day I stay here." "Or have you just chosen the only path available?" I countered, my own heart breaking. "Liana, you need to meet men who aren't ancient, weary kings carrying centuries of baggage. Men who could give you a normal life, children, a future that isn't tied to an immortal ruler. I will not let you choose a gilded cage out of ignorance." She stared at me and then she laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You are sending me away to meet other men because you love me. That is the most magnificently idiotic thing I have ever heard." "Perhaps," I conceded, a sad smile touching my lips, "but it is necessary. I will not trap you even with the best intentions. You deserve the world, literally. So go, see it, experience it, and if after seeing everything out there you still want to come back to this, to me, then I will believe you. Then I will let myself hope." She left without another word, her anger a cold wind in her wake. A week later she departed. I had arranged everything, a discreet but loyal guard of 4, a sensible lady's companion, letters of introduction to 5 allied courts, and a chest of gold sufficient for a princess. I stood on the battlements, the wolves silent around me, and watched her carriage become a speck on the southern road. The emptiness that descended was absolute. The castle, which had felt too small with her in it, now felt cavernously, desolately huge. I had exiled my own heart, and I had no idea if it would ever return. The reports came, every fortnight. Silas's network was efficient. "Lady Liana has arrived at the summer court. King Alistair, 25, has welcomed her warmly. King Alistair has been most attentive. He has invited her hawking. She attended a royal ball. The king danced with her twice." Each line was a tiny dagger. I imagined him, young, handsome, unburdened, his kingdom sunny and warm, a perfect match. I threw myself into work, into border skirmishes and trade negotiations, anything to numb the constant gnawing anxiety. The reports continued. "She has left the summer court for the mountain clans. King Alistair was reportedly disappointed." A flicker of hope. "The clan chief's son, a renowned warrior, has shown interest. He offered to teach her axe throwing. She declined his offer of courtship. She moves on to the coastal republics." My emotions were a pendulum: jealousy at the attention she received, fear that she would find happiness elsewhere, a desperate, clawing hope that she would not. I told myself I wanted her happiness above all, that it was the point of the exercise. It was a noble lie I repeated every night in my empty chambers. 5.5 months into her exile, a carriage bearing my own crest was spotted on the horizon. It was early. She wasn't due for another 2 weeks. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had something happened? Had she come back to formally renounce me, to collect her things and leave for good? I waited in my study, every muscle tense. When Alara announced her, I barely heard the words, "Show her in, now." And then she was there, standing in the doorway, backlit by the corridor torchlight, a silhouette familiar and utterly changed. She wore a practical traveling dress, dust on her boots, the scent of distant roads and sea salt lingering about her. But it was her eyes that held me captive. They were no longer the eyes of a girl, or even a young woman testing her power. They were the eyes of a queen, assured, weary, and blazing with an unwavering truth.
Ilara, after one agonized look between us, silently closed the door, granting us the privacy we had never truly had. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the suddenly too small room. "You're back early," I managed, my voice a dry rasp. I remained behind my desk, the last frail fortress of my authority. I saw enough. She took a step into the room, then another, her movements deliberate, owning the space. She stopped before my desk, not as a supplicant, but as an equal presenting a case. I met the Summer King, Alistair. The name was a punch to my gut. I said nothing. Charming, young, handsome. He offered me everything, a crown of woven gold, a kingdom of sunshine, a future with laughter and children and simplicity. Her gaze never wavered from mine. He offered me a version of the world. Another step closer. The scent of her, of journey and jasmine, filled my senses. I traveled to the mountain clans. I met their warriors, strong, brave, uncomplicated. They offered me adventure, protection, a love as solid and straightforward as the peaks they call home. She placed her hands flat on my desk, leaning forward slightly. They offered me a foundation. My breath hitched. I could see the memory of those offers in her eyes, could feel the weight of them in the quiet room. "I went to the coastal republics," she continued, her voice dropping to an intimate murmur that vibrated in my bones. "I met artists who saw the world in colors I'd never imagined, merchants who spoke of spices from mythical islands, sailors with eyes full of horizons. They were young, vibrant, bursting with life and possibility. They offered me freedom. They offered me easy." She straightened then, taking a final, definitive step around the side of the desk, eliminating the last physical barrier between us. She stood before me, so close I could see the flecks of silver in her blue eyes, could see the faint dusting of freckles the southern sun had painted across her nose. "And I compared every single one of them," she said, each word a deliberate, softly spoken hammer blow. "To you. Every conversation, every smile, every moment of potential. And do you know what I found, Kaylin?" I couldn't speak. I could only shake my head, a minute, desperate movement. Her lips curved into the smallest, most profound smile. "None of them were you." The air left my lungs in a rush. "None of them made my heart feel like it does when I walk these halls knowing you are near. None of them challenged my mind until it sparked and caught fire. None of them looked at me and saw not just who I am, but who I could become. None of them had waited for me. None of them had loved me enough to let me go." A single tear escaped, tracing a clean path through the travel dust on her cheek. "I didn't come back because I couldn't find better. I came back because, after seeing the entire world, I finally understood. There is no one better for me. There is only you." The final wall around my heart, the one built of fear, duty, and centuries of isolation, shattered into dust. There was no more room for denial, for delay, for fear. She had journeyed across kingdoms and returned with a verdict written in the language of her soul. I rose from my chair. The movement was slow, as if in a dream. I towered over her, but for the first time the difference in our size felt irrelevant. The power in the room was hers. "Do you still want me?"
she asked, the question hanging in the charged space between us. I looked at her, this miracle who had been a terrified child, who had grown into a woman of such courage and clarity that she humbled me. I saw the lingering fear in her eyes, the vulnerability beneath the brave words, and I knew, with a certainty that eclipsed every doubt I had ever harbored, that my waiting was over. "I have wanted you," I confessed, the raw truth freeing me. "For years. I fought it. I hated myself for it. You were too young, too vulnerable, too much my sacred charge." I reached out, my hand hovering near her face, not touching, and offering. "But yes, Liana, I want you. I love you. I have for longer than was proper, and with a depth that terrified me. I sent you away because I needed your choice to be completely, gloriously free. And you came back. You chose to come back." The tears fell freely from her eyes now, but they were tears of relief, of joy. She leaned into my hovering hand, her cheek pressing against my palm. The contact was electric, a completion of a circuit begun 8 years ago in a cold courtyard. A shuddering breath escaped her. "Then stop waiting," she whispered. And I did. I bent my head, and she rose on her toes, and after 8 years of distance, of propriety, of agonizing patience, our lips met. It was not a collision of passion, but a homecoming. It was soft and reverent and absolutely perfect. It tasted of salt tears and promised tomorrows and a patience finally rewarded. It was the first shy touch after an eternity of longing, and it held the weight of every unsaid word, every guarded glance, every lonely year. When we finally parted, breathless, foreheads resting together, she smiled, a real, radiant, sun-breaking-through-clouds smile. "That," she breathed, "was worth 8 years." "Agreed," I murmured, and kissed her again, because I could, because I would spend the rest of my immortal life making up for every moment we had spent apart. The sound of a discreet cough came from the doorway. Ilara was standing there, her hands on her hips, but her eyes were shining with tears. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "a modicum of propriety, for a few more months at least." I laughed, the sound strange and wonderful to my own ears. I kept my arm around Liana, unwilling to let even an inch of space between us again. "We will do this properly, Ilara, as always." I looked down at Liana, at the woman in my arms. "We will do this properly. I will court you, publicly, traditionally. The kingdom will need time to see, to understand. It will be a year at least before we can marry." Liana nodded, her face serene. "1 more year. I can wait. I've become an expert at it." And so the final wait began. But this was a wait filled with light, not shadow. I courted Liana of the Truth Singer, not my ward. I brought her flowers from the hothouse. I commissioned a luthier to craft her a fine harp, knowing she loved music. We walked in the gardens every evening, our hands clasped, with Frost and Obsidian as our chaperones. We dined together, talking for hours, the easy connection flooding back, now deepened and sweetened by acknowledged love.
I announced my intentions to the court. There was surprise, of course. Some murmured about the past, but the years of my very public distance, her independent achievements, and the sheer obviousness of our joy disarmed most critics. The narrative shifted from scandal to an epic tale of patience and honor. The people, it seemed, loved a romance where the king had waited for his queen to choose him. The year passed in a blur of happiness. I learned the cadence of her laughter, the way she bit her lip when concentrating, the feel of her hand in mine. I shared my burdens with her, my centuries of memories, my fears for the kingdom's future. She listened, she advised, she challenged. She was not just my love, She was becoming my partner. On the morning of her 21st birthday, I led her to the private royal garden at dawn. The wolves were there, a silent, approving circle. I did not kneel, for we were past such formalities between us. I simply took both her hands in mine, the first rays of sun gilding her hair. "Liana," I said, my voice steady with a certainty born of endless waiting. 8 years ago, I made a vow to protect you. Today, I wish to make a new one. Will you marry me? Not because of a contract, or out of gratitude or duty, but because I love you, because you are the bravest and kindest soul I have ever known, because with you I have found a future worth more than all my yesterdays. Will you be my queen?" She didn't cry this time. She smiled, a smile that held the warmth of every sunrise we would share. "Yes," she said, the word a vow in itself. "Yes, Kaylin, 1,000 times yes." 3 months later, we were married in the castle's ancient stone chapel, draped not in gold, but in greenery and white winter roses. She wore a gown of deep Lycan blue, and her only jewel was a simple silver circlet. I wore black. Our vows were not the standard ones. We vowed to protect, to challenge, to respect, and to choose each other, every day for all the days to come. When I kissed my bride, with our pack and our kingdom as witnesses, the last echo of that quiet carriage in the courtyard finally faded away. It was replaced by the roaring, joyful certainty of a love that had been tested by time and patience, and had emerged not just intact, but unbreakable. Our story was not one of instant passion, but of a love that grew in the protected space of a vow. A love that understood that sometimes the deepest feeling is not expressed in a kiss, but in the courage to wait for the right one.